Hello and welcome to the 3Bs podcast, where we go beyond the numbers and get into what actually makes a business work. I'm your host, Stephanie Marshall, founder of ABCS UK, a multi-award-winning boutique finance and systems partner. I help business owners who've outgrown the basics bring clarity, structure, and proper systems into their business so things finally feel in control. If you want more clarity, more confidence, and a business that doesn't feel like constant chaos, you're in the right place. Each week we tackle real problems, answer the questions you're probably already thinking, and give you practical steps you can actually use in around 15 minutes. So if you're ready to build a better business with confidence and clarity, then let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast, your go-to place for around 15 minutes of motivation, education, and inspiration to help you build a better business each week. If we haven't met before, hi, my name is Stephanie Marshall. I am the founder of ABCS UK, a multi-award-winning boutique finance and systems partner, and I help growing businesses who have outgrown their bookkeeper move from messy, reactive finances to clear and structured numbers and systems that they can use to actually run their businesses properly. Because I care about the people behind the business and not just the numbers. Now, today's episode started with me thinking about the most expensive mistake that I've ever made in ABCS UK. Yeah, I'm not perfect either. I'm growing right alongside you business owners, and I make mistakes too. But interestingly, it wasn't a tax mistake. It wasn't choosing the wrong software. It wasn't losing money. It wasn't even a bad client. It was trusting that everyone would automatically know what not to touch. A few years ago, somebody made a change to a client's date of birth in our Xero accounting software. Now, on the surface, that sounds tiny. A date of birth, one field, one piece of information. No big deal, right? Except it wasn't, because that one change created operational chaos. It created stress for the client, it created stress for me, it created hours of work trying to work out what had happened, where it had happened, and most importantly, how to fix it. The really frustrating part with this was that the date of birth was actually correct everywhere else in our systems, in our softwares, in our CRMs. It was just wrong in one place. One tiny change, one tiny detail that had a lot of consequences. The good news is that we fixed it. And the better news is that we actually learned from that, because now one of the checks in our tax return process is to verify the client's date of birth before submission, rather than assuming that it's correct because it was correct when I put it into the software when we onboarded the client. Problem solved. But it taught me something really important. The things that cost us the most in business rarely look expensive at first. They're usually small, tiny, quiet mistakes that are really easy to ignore. And today's episode is all about those kinds of mistakes, because I see them every single week. Not just in my own business, but in clients' businesses too. And they're costing business owners far more than they actually realize. Let's go through a few of them. Mistake number 1, keeping everything in your head. This is one of the lessons that I really wish that I'd learned much sooner, and I've talked about on the podcast before. Writing down systems and processes. When you're a small business owner starting out, it's very easy to think that I'll remember that, or I know how that works, or I'll deal with it when I need to. And for a while, that really does work. I mean, I lived that way for maybe the first 2-3 years of ABCS UK. But there's only you. And because there's only you, you know how everything works. You know where everything is. You know what needs doing. You know those little tiny nuances that each individual client or customer has. But then the business grows. You bring in support, whether that's freelance, an employee in the office, or an outsourced individual. You hire somebody, or even you just take a holiday, and suddenly you realize something, that the business only works because you're the one holding it together. I hate to break it to you, but that's not a business, that's a dependency. The reality is that every process that only exists in your head is a risk to your business. Not because anyone is doing anything wrong, because people can't follow a procedure they cannot see. I genuinely wish that I'd started documenting things years earlier than I did. And not because I love systems, which obviously I do, but because I love simplicity. And systems create simplicity. The most expensive process in business isn't the one that you actually spend the time documenting. It's the one you have to rebuild after something goes wrong. Now, mistake number 2, let's talk about something that I see all the time with my clients, and it causes them huge amounts of stress. And that's not saving for tax.
We worked with a limited company client who was doing really well. The money was coming in, the business was growing, everything looked positive until the first VAT quarter became due and the money wasn't there in the bank. And that's not because the client was irresponsible or because the business was failing, because nobody had deliberately set money aside. And previous accountants hadn't told them that they needed to do that either. So what happened? A payment plan, interest, stress, sleepless nights, constant worry, you know the drill. But here's the thing, the VAT bill itself wasn't the problem. That VAT bill was always coming, and the stress wasn't caused by the tax itself that was due, the stress was caused by not planning for that tax. Business owners often tell me, but the money was in the bank. Yes, but being in the bank doesn't mean it's yours to spend. Some of that belongs to HMRC. You are holding it on their behalf. And the earlier you accept that in business, the easier business becomes. It's important to note that yes, this was a problem and a payment plan had to be set up, but the HMRC are there to help you with a payment plan if you have made that mistake too. And I see it almost every week. So don't feel ashamed or embarrassed by that. We can get a payment plan set up, you can get that paid off and relieve some of that stress and worry and plan for future quarters, because those VAT bills come every quarter like clockwork. Mistake number 3, underpricing without realizing it. And this one is sneaky, and I know I talk about pricing all the time because most people think underpricing means deliberately charging too little. Now, sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. I saw this with a product-based business that I work with. The same product, the same customer, the same order, different price. The second order, they charged a lower amount. They were keeping all their orders on a spreadsheet, so they didn't have any system to look back and see what they charged the previous order. They also didn't have any database or list of what they charged per product, and if different wholesale clients had different terms or bulk discounts agreed, none of that was written down. So that second order was charged at a lower amount, not because there was a promotion, not for a strategic reason like a bulk or loyalty discount, just because. And when that happens repeatedly, revenue quietly leaks out of your business. A few pounds here, a few pounds there, a few discounts that nobody tracks, a few prices that haven't been reviewed, and suddenly you've lost thousands. Most businesses don't have one huge pricing problem. They have lots of small pricing inconsistencies. And together, they really can add up to a lot of lost revenue in your business. Mistake number 4, ignoring debtors. Now, this one might make some people uncomfortable, but it does need saying. An unpaid invoice is not income. Let me say that again so that we're clear. An unpaid invoice is not income. I've seen business owners celebrate sales, celebrate turnover, celebrate growth, whilst at the same time having thousands of pounds sat in aged debtors. That's money owed to you, owed to your business from customers and clients. One client currently has an £8,000 invoice outstanding. £8,000! And it hasn't been chased. Now, I know why. They're busy. They're focused on delivering. They don't like those awkward conversations. They assume the customer will pay in good faith. But assumptions don't pay invoices. And if that invoice doesn't get paid, how are you paying your suppliers? Because every single day that invoice remains unpaid, the cash flow of that business becomes tighter than it needs to be. A lot of business owners don't actually have a sales problem when they think they do. They have a collections problem, and that's a very different issue. Mistake number 5 sounds boring, I know, but this is exactly why it gets ignored. Not reviewing your costs. Subscriptions, software, monthly payments, they go up all the time and nobody ever checks in. We've seen duplicate Microsoft subscriptions because they're paid at different times within the month, so they don't realize they're paying for it twice. We've seen businesses paying for software tiers far beyond what they actually need. And we've seen systems that nobody uses anymore. And because the amount leaving each month isn't huge, nobody notices £20 here, £49 there, £80 somewhere else. Eventually, that becomes hundreds or even thousands of pounds lost per year in your business. And it's not because anyone made a bad decision. It's because nobody reviewed those decisions they made 6 months ago, or 12 months ago, or 3 years ago. Business owners are often looking for ways to make more money. Sometimes the easiest money to find is the money you're already wasting rather than bringing more in. The next mistake is one that catches people out all the time, because business owners see money sitting in the company account and think, I'll just take that. I've seen people take money to pay their personal mortgage. I've seen people fund private medical treatment and operations. And I've seen people make withdrawals without understanding the tax implications of that. And look, I completely understand why. Life happens, things come up. And business owners are people. We're not robots. But company money isn't automatically yours to take. There are tax implications, cash flow implications, and planning implications. And when those aren't understood, problems appear later. And usually it's exactly at the wrong moment in your business. Now, if you've noticed a running theme in today's episode, it's this. None of the mistakes looked particularly dangerous at the time. Nobody woke up intending to create a problem. And nobody deliberately made a bad decision. Nobody thought, I know, let's make this business more stressful. Every single one started small, felt manageable, and seemed harmless until it wasn't. And that's exactly why the most expensive mistakes don't look expensive at first. They're the things that we postpone, the things we assume will sort themselves out, and the things we don't think need attention just yet. Before we finish, as I always do with the 3Bs podcast, I want to give you one thing to do this week. And that's to ask yourself this one question and answer it. What's the one thing in my business right now that I'm currently ignoring because it doesn't feel urgent? Not important, urgent. Because those are two very different things. The thing you're avoiding reviewing, the invoice you're avoiding chasing, the process you're avoiding documenting because you just don't think you have the time, the pricing you're avoiding updating, the report you're avoiding looking at because you don't really want to know what it says or you don't understand what it says. Because in my experience, that's usually where the next expensive mistake is hiding. The mistakes that cost us the most rarely arrive with warning signs and red flags. They don't announce themselves. They quietly sit in the background, getting bigger and snowballing until eventually they demand attention. So let's not wait for that moment. Let's fix the small things while they're still small, because your future self will thank you for it. If this episode helped you think differently about your business, then it's done its job. Make sure you're following or subscribed so you don't miss the next episode of the 3Bs podcast. And if you found it useful, please do take 30 seconds to leave a review. It helps more business owners find this podcast and start running their businesses properly too. If you want more insights behind the scenes and the reality of what it actually takes to build a better business, come and connect with me on social media, ABCS UK on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter or X. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and all the links are in the show notes, because your business deserves better. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the 3Bs podcast. If this has helped you think differently about your business, then it's done its job. Make sure you're following or subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. And if you found it useful, please do leave a review. It helps more business owners find this and start running their businesses properly. If you want more insights behind the scenes and the reality of what it actually takes to build a better business, come and connect with me on social media. And if you're ready to stop guessing and start running your business with clarity, structure, and confidence, your next step is just a click away, because your business deserves better. I'll see you in the next episode.